Joe, Frank Dello Stritto.
Frank Dello Stritto. Welcome to the Visual Radio Film Library.
Okay, 1 second. Let me close my office door.
It is May 2nd, people.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, it's May 2nd, and we're not live on the air. We're in the studio, Frank.
Okay, well.
Thank you, Joe LaRocca. We are rolling, and we got a few films to talk about.
That's right, because I'm going to be out, and so we're doing a mass reviewing here.
Now, I hear you're going out to Universal Studios to go through the film vault for us.
No, I wish that were true, but they would shoot me if I gave anything to public domain guys anyway. No, I'm going to Hawaii. My son's getting married.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And destination weddings seem to be the thing. So the bride wanted a destination wedding in Hawaii. I proposed both Disney and Jersey and got shot down both times. But Hawaii it is.
Well, hopefully the bride's parents are paying for it all.
Well, no one's asked me for a dime yet. I'm lying in wait. We'll handle it there.
Hey, but maybe you'll catch some cool movies in Hawaii.
Maybe. I have signed up for Netflix, and I am watching something that I never saw when I was a kid, and that is Dark Shadows. And
you never saw the two? I think there are two movies, correct?
I never saw either one of the movies, and I never saw the only Dark Shadows I ever saw was before they went supernatural. It was kind of mysterious, and everything was foreboding, but there was none of the supernatural in. And then I got a job after school, and when I grew up, it played at 3:30 in the afternoon, I think.
Yes, you're right.
During my high school years, and I never saw one because I worked in a shoe store. So, and I was a big expert on Bela Lugosi and all the classic horror things. And then, these girls came in, and my classmates, and they were just, they loved Barnabas, and then they really loved Quentin the werewolf, and I didn't know what they were talking about. And then I started reading about it in the monster magazines, but I never actually saw one because they didn't repeat them, and I was always working.
Well, 2 points on that. Number one, I used to work for my dad, so I set up his reel-to-reel audio deck with one of those Radio Shack things where you could connect it to the electricity and connect it to the light switch. So I'd have my mom flick on the light switch at the appropriate time, and I would hear the audio of Dark Shadows, right?
There you go.
But her friend from 2 doors down was over the house, and Camille said, support this kid's ideas, because she was amazed when my mother would flip the switch, and all of a sudden the TV and the reel-to-reel deck would go on. This was back in, 1968?
66 is when Barnabas made his first appearance.
So. All right, so 66, 67. I never saw the earlier ones.
Yeah, well, most people don't know they exist because it was kind of slugging it along as a not too different soap opera. It was more youth-oriented, and it was, had these dark shadows, these old mansions and all that, but they weren't going anywhere, and they decided to bring in a vampire. It's interesting because Barnabas, appears at the very end of the first episode that his character comes into. Then you don't see him much. He pops in and out, and then you can almost, as you're watching the different shows, because I guess I have watched 30 now in the past 2 weeks. I watch a couple every night. You can just see his character becoming more and more the dominant character of the soap opera. So that means it was catching on. People were finding out. Kids were racing home from school to see it and all that. So you can see it changing under you. But I until this week, when people said Dark Shadows, I imagined a much different show based on the memories of what I saw.
And you know that the Dark Shadows movie with Johnny Depp is coming out.
Yep.
And The Dark Knight Rises is coming out.
Yep.
And I saw The Avengers last Thursday. And so there's this whole summer of movies coming out, with Dark Shadows being one of them.
Yep. And just as purely by coincidence, Jonathan Frid has died. He died, I think, about 2 weeks ago.
That's correct.
And he was, I forget how old, I figured it out, though, he was 42 when he made his first appearance as Barnabas. And I will say, watching these old soap operas, the story moves at a glacial pace and things are a bit hokey, but he is really fine in the role. And I had never seen him act Barnabas before, and I've seen precious little of him otherwise, but he's really fine, and I can see why he caused a sensation, because he was something quite out of the ordinary for afternoon soap operas.
And you know what I'm going to do, Frank, is take this tape of ours here, because one of my guests was, of course, Quentin. David Selby was on the show. So I will take what we're discussing right here and David Selby, and we will have a little Dark Shadows special, people.
Okay.
And you know what we'll do is too, and we'll talk to you again later when you've assessed more of these old Dark Shadows. Now, you haven't seen the 2 movies?
I have not seen the 2 movies.
Okay, I'm pretty sure there are 2 movies at least, and the movies are very good. Mm-hmm. I remember going to the drive-in and seeing them, and I was very impressed, being a fan of the TV show.
Yeah, I kind of resented it because all the girls, I was always the guy that knew all about horror movies in school, and all of a sudden, all these girls knew everything I didn't. So I avoided the movies. I thought, this is revisionist stuff. I'm not going to get into it. But I'd better see the movies, especially if you're going to have me on the same show as Quentin, or at least be quoting me in front of Quentin. By the way, if you see him, tell him my wife grew up on him, and she can't wait for him to come in the show. She thinks our having access to these old TV shows is great, and we're watching Dark Shadows 2 tonight, and she just loves it. She says, "When's Quentin coming in? When's Quentin coming in?" So,
well, he went to other shows.
Oh yeah, he had a career beyond that. I've seen him in other things.
Yeah, I want to say Falcon Crest. I think that's it. Mm-hmm. But God bless him. He's got a couple of books out, and I interviewed him on Lincoln's Better Angels.
Okay.
So he wrote about Abe Lincoln, and it's kind of historical fiction. Mm-hmm. But he's a very nice man, and I taped his lecture, and I did an interview with him. Very, very nice man.
Okay.
So, all right. So we're going to talk about 3 different films for the dates of May. Today's the 2nd.
Yep.
So May 4th, May 11th, and May 18th.
Yep. Okay, so May 4th is Jailbait, 1954 movie, an Ed Wood movie, and I think this is the first Ed Wood movie that you've ever had on your show. Wow. And this is his second feature film. His first one was the infamous or famous, however you want to phrase it, Glen or Glinda with Bela Lugosi. It was the transvestite film where Wood himself played the lead under a false name as a transvestite, and that is a cult classic. And also a cult classic is this movie Jailbait, and I watched it. I'd seen this like 40 years ago, and I hadn't watched it since, and I watched it last night, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. It is typical Ed Wood. That is, the dialogue is terrible, everything's kind of done on the cheap. The actors range from competent to highly incompetent, but somehow it all works. And one of the things in my career, if you want to call it that, as a movie writer and all that, is why does Ed Wood hold on to our attraction? Because he is not a good filmmaker, but I think there's a schlocky sincerity that kind of comes through it, and it's a guy who has something to say, but he just doesn't talk very well. He's not a good filmmaker, and the thing that surprises me about him is he doesn't get better as the years go by. You think someone would polish. Okay, the first film is crude, the second film's a little better.
That's usually the way it goes,
But he was always. I mean, he almost had a disregard for the basics of his craft.
I have a theory that, you put Rock Hudson in front of the camera, and Rock Hudson is said to have had the worst film or screen test in history. Mm-hmm. And they would use it to show aspiring actors how good you could become after being so bad.
Yeah.
But and as we turned out, after he died, that he was a better actor than anyone ever knew.
Yep.
But
played a real life role for a while.
But Keanu Reeves too. You see Keanu going from kind of a nerdy actor to pretty much, The Matrix. He evolved from pretty lame in the first one to better, and really, he played that role pretty well as a Superman. Yeah.
Keanu Reeves is an actor who, in my opinion, gives good performances or bad performances, and nothing in the middle.
Right. I agree with you.
I thought in Bram Stoker's Dracula, I thought that accent was atrocious. I wondered how they could let it get through the final cut. But in some films, was it A Walk in the Sun or something? The love story. I thought he was very good in that. And I won't say he's an inconsistent actor, but he's for some reason he nails it or he doesn't.
Yeah,
And I tend to feel the same way about Leonardo DiCaprio. When he's good, he's very good, and when he's bad, he's not good at all.
And I don't like Leonardo DiCaprio in the new J. Edgar Hoover. I thought that he was miscast. He wasn't bad in the role, but it wasn't for him, and it was all the heavy makeup, and it was like, come on, you're trying to be a serious actor when you're Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay. Well, we'll have to agree to disagree there. I liked him in that role, and I thought I would have given him an Oscar over whoever else was up for it this year. I did not like him as Howard Hughes, though. I thought he was. Well, let me rephrase that. As a young Howard Hughes, I thought he was a disaster. I thought he was ruining the movie. I think as the older Hughes got, the better he got in the role. But I didn't care for him in that movie at all. Interesting.
But it proves your point, and my point, that Ed Wood is an anomaly, because if you put people in front of some situation, they're going to improve. That's just intelligent people improve.
Yeah, no, he made movies for a long time, but he never got any better.
But there is something else, Frank. There's a spirit when someone leaves a phone message that's pretty funny. And if you have that sincerity, which you say that Ed Wood has, that spirit, whatever his passion was, might have cut through all of the dreck.
Yeah, somehow it does. I mean, I rewatched Glenn or Glenda, not connected with this show. I rewatched it about a month ago. And if somebody said, "Was it?" I say it's a masterpiece. It is. The elements are junk, but somehow they add up to something that you can't turn away from.
A masterpiece is pretty heavy.
Okay, well, give it a lower classing. I don't get it.
Because he's not a master, so how can he have a masterpiece?
I don't know. I mean, that's a whole other.
Wait! I got it. Schlock masterpiece.
Yeah, maybe.
Because he's a schlock master, right?
Yeah, he's well, we have to use a more cerebral term. It's a schlockmeister.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really?
A couple of things about this movie your viewers should look forward to. This is Steve Reeves' first movie.
Whoa.
Steve Reeves. And it's the only movie he ever made where you actually hear his voice, because all his other movies were in Italy and Europe, and he was always dubbed. And they did a decent job dubbing him, because his real voice is not too different from his dubbed voice. The dubbed voice is, they always, these Italian muscle men movies, when they dub them, they always put a deep, heavy voice in, and Reeves isn't quite that deep and heavy, but it's perfectly adequate voice. And let's see, I'd heard his voice. He did one or two TV shows, made a guest appearance here and there, and you heard his voice, but you wouldn't know. If I didn't tell you that, you might not know, because it's not that different from what they dubbed from.
What is it with Steve Reeves as Hercules, George Reeves as Superman, Keanu Reeves as Neo?
And Christopher Reeve as Superman.
Thank you.
I guess it says name your son Reeve, and he's got a career as a strongman.
Flying around, yeah.
Yeah, you got me. Christopher Reeve, George Reeves, and I remember when I was a kid, the rumor went amongst us that Steve Reeves and George Reeves were related, which is totally untrue. But we all believed it, because they were both the two strong men we knew.
Well, the other thing too is I think that sometimes filmmakers find a name, someone with a name, and that might give them an edge in casting for that kind of cachet. Just for the good, Steve Reeves, George Reeves, it kind of works.
Yeah. There's something to that. I don't think for these cases. I mean, Steve Reeves became Mr. Universe or whatever. He was the Arnold Schwarzenegger of his day. So I guess it didn't hurt General Schwarzkopf that everyone thought he was named Schwarzenegger before the war started.
Hey, if I were Arnold, I would have changed my name to Reeves. Arnold Reeves.
He might have made it, yeah.
I mean, Schwarzenegger is amazing. He got that past Conan, because that name alone.
Yeah. There's one elderly part in this movie played by an actor known as Herbert Rawlinson, who was an old-time actor. And the thing is, I think the day this movie wrapped, he dropped dead. He had a heart attack. And
from working with Ed Wood? I don't know.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, Ed, the people that worked with Wood tended to like him.
Oh yeah, I would. I'm just desecrating his name for the fun of it.
Okay. Yeah, Steve Reeves, didn't speak much about Ed Wood, but he spoke well of him, because this was his first acting job, I believe, and Wood helped him get the union card he needed. He didn't know what to do in that respect. And so he spoke fondly enough of Ed Wood. And and Ed Wood wanted Bela Lugosi to play the psychiatrist, and
of course
Lugosi could have, but Lugosi was ill, and Woods, if it took him 2 years to make a movie, it's because he spent 23.5 months trying to get financing, and then he had 2 weeks to shoot, or sometimes 2 days to shoot. I don't know the shooting time of this film, but it couldn't have been much, and it's pretty basic stuff, but it works. It's you kind of see the ending coming. But I think in 1954 it must have been considered a daring ending. The ending looks like it belongs more on a Twilight Zone episode than on a crime thriller. But it all works for me. I really enjoyed the film. And one actor I have to mention is Timothy Farrell, who plays a character named Vic Brady, who's kind of the bad man of it. And he also played a psychiatrist in Glen or Glenda, and he had a certain force of character. And a couple of things. This actor Timothy Farrell, he couldn't support himself as an actor, so he worked other places, and among them he worked in the sheriff's office. And some of the scenes in a jail and in the police department I understand, are actually real location shots that these guys came in with their cameras, said, "Hey, we got to be out of here in 2 hours." Filmed their scene and got out, and I'm sure Farrell had a hand in that, trying to arrange that.
That's pretty cool that they actually got them to. They were allowed to do that.
Okay, and there's one scene the three movies we will tie together tonight by performances by a black artist. But the black man in this movie is not black. There is a scene right in the middle of this of basically a blackface comic. There's a white woman and a black actor, but it's not a black comic. A white straight man who's a woman, and a black comic who is not black at all. And it is a really old-fashioned blackface routine, right out of the minstrel show.
And is it like in a club?
Yeah, they're in a club, and Wood would have had no money to stage this kind of thing. He must have said, "Hey, can I film this act in here?" Because the crime in the movie is the theft at a theater, and so Wood was famous for throwing in things into his movies that what's that doing there? And there's this comic routine, which if they did this about Italians the way they did it about the blacks, you and I'd be out there with guns looking for these guys.
That bad, huh? Whoa.
Really offensive. And I have to think, Ed Wood wouldn't have had the budget to stage this. He must have just filmed something that was there. And even 1954, if you watch the movie, you say 1954, they were still doing this stuff in 1954. This is like something out of the 30s or before, but it's right there, and there's no talking around it. So I'd say the value of it is here we have a photographic record of something that was probably still being done in 1954. I would not have guessed it.
That's pretty amazing. And what I'm going to do, Frank, is say this is Visual Radio Film Library, and it's part of the WinCAM public domain feature on Friday night. And the Friday night, May 4th, 2012 film is Jailbait. And now we're going to move on to May 11th, which is...
Killer Diller.
Did we play this before?
You did play this before, and I tell you the truth, I forget what I said about it. As I recall, we didn't talk much about the movie. We got on to other things. But it's 1948, and you've shown a lot of movies from the late 40s, and the common theme that ties them all together is the world is changing. The war is over. The post-war has begun, and one of the big changes is television. Television, among other things, is killing vaudeville, and vaudeville is dying. But this is a filmed account, if you want to call it that, of a 1948 stage show, of which there wouldn't be many left before that world died. And it's a very, the plot is almost added on as a joke. The impresario who runs this theater is stringing acts together. He gets a rather crazy musician, and the musician makes his girlfriend disappear and can't find her. And 4 cops come in, and these are like the black Keystone. Everybody in the movie is black, by the way. Black Keystone cops, and they're tripping over each other. Some pretty old-fashioned slapstick, and they spend the whole movie wondering where she is. But in the 5 minutes that begin the movie, between the 5 minutes that begin the movie and the 5 minutes that end it, is about an hour of nothing but a procession of vaudeville acts. Tap dancers, singers, dancers. I should say music acts. It's like if you went to a musical review show, and they show clips of the crowded audience cheering and all that. But if you listen closely, there's no audience when the acts are on. They must have filmed this in an empty theater. And the one performer that everyone will probably know today is Nat King Cole. And Nat King Cole is about to become a big star, largely because of television. He had good recording, so he was no slacker there. But he had early television had a Nat King Cole show where he'd come out and he'd basically sing with his band and all that.
Yes, and it was a very good show. I've seen them. They're being re-released on MVD.
Yeah. Now let's see. When it comes to Nat King Cole, I'm a Mona Lisa man. I like it when he sings that kind of song. These songs are a bit more lively, which I don't think were his forte. I thought he had no peer when it came to those smooth love songs or the ballads or whatever. But he's in the middle of it. He sings a couple of songs with his band. There's some tap dancers, the Clark Brothers, and there's an actress. There's a stand-up comic, a woman named Moms Mabley. Do you remember Moms Mabley?
Of course I do.
All right.
She did Bobby Hebb's Sonny.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
Okay, I know you're the Bobby Hebb man, so maybe, when I was watching this movie, I said, gee, Joe should give this to one of his music critics to talk about, not to me, because they might know some of these acts better than I do.
Moms Mabley she was very well known, and of course, Nat King Cole, Bobby Hebb, was part of that. He really appreciated Nat, of course. But Bobby at the time would have been 10 years old.
Mm-hmm. What happened to Bobby Hebb, by the way?
He passed away August 3rd of 2010.
Okay, and he had the one big hit, Sonny, right? And did he have anything other than that?
Yes, he had 4 hits, actually. He co-wrote a song called A Natural Man, which won a Grammy for Lou Rawls. Mm-hmm. He followed up Sonny with A Satisfied Mind, which was a big hit from Porter Wagner in the 50s. It's a big #1 hit for many weeks, and Bobby covered it, went to number 40. But that was probably on the strength of Sonny. And Love, Love, Love went top 35 in England, strangely, 6 years after the Sonny album was released. Mm-hmm. So Sonny was released in '66. Then A Satisfied Mind came out. Then A Natural Man came out for Lou Rawls, written by Bobby, and won the Grammy like 1971. And then in '72, 6 years after the Sonny album, this Northern Soul phenomenon was happening in England. And Love, Love, Love from the Sonny album just took off like a rocket because of this Northern Soul thing, which exists to this day. The northern part of England gets into soul music, American soul music. So they call it's Northern Britain, they call it Northern Soul. And they go in the dance clubs. Sonny's a big hit in the dance clubs. Love, Love, Love. And Bobby has a third Northern Soul hit called You Wanna Change Me. Now, I won't stay too long on the subject, but Edwin Starr just passed away, and he had a big hit in America called War.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so War was a Temptation song, but it was a little too political for the Temptation, so Edwin Starr had this monster hit with it. But in England, in Northern Soul, Edwin Starr was a god. He was a Northern Soul god, and they never touched War. It was all his other stuff. So it's a very strange phenomena of these talented individuals being very famous in pockets of the world. Bobby Hebb in Germany, Japan, and England. But of course, he had a super song in Sonny, which made him a household name.
Yeah. Now, you knew Bobby Hebb, is that right?
We were very close personal friends. He was, I'm honored to say at his eulogy, they mentioned, I guess, one friend, and that was me.
Oh, God bless you. Was he comfortable on stage performing?
Oh, Bobby was performing at the age of 3. His birthday was July 26th, 1938. He was born. So in 1941, he was 3 years old, and he made a stage debut on his birthday, tap dancing with his brother Hal Hebb.
Well, the reason I ask is the only time I ever saw Bobby Hebb was Sonny was a hit, and he came on Dick Clark's American Bandstand.
Right.
and and that was all lip sync.
Right.
So he stood there with his guitar and he played it, but I didn't. You were, especially the black performers. The black performers, they would be dancing all over the place and doing all, really entertaining to watch, and they really put on a good show. And Bobby Head, I thought, was much more restrained than the others, and I always wondered, was he mainly a songwriter who felt more comfortable behind?
Oh, no. He was a magnificent performer.
Okay, maybe I just caught him on a bad day.
It wasn't even a bad day. I think that the lip syncing thing was not for him. He had a friend called Hoss Allen. So if you go into YouTube, you can watch the Hoss Allen tapes, and Bobby's doing James Brown stuff all over the all over the floor. But that's like 1965, 64, 66. Right around the Sonny time. He does lip sync Sonny on the Hoss Allen show, but he does 2 songs that we don't have recorded by him. One of those big, not See You in September. We have Bobby doing that, but one of those songs, and then a real James Brownish number. He's a magnificent stage performer. He played on stage with the Beatles,
He just didn't care for the lip syncing. Wasn't his gig.
No, but when you see him, the guy was on stage at the age of 3. At 9 years old, he was the 3rd African American on the Grand Ole Opry with Roy Acuff.
Okay, well, I'm glad to talk about this because I haven't got a heck of a lot to say about Killer Diller. It's basically a musical review, but there's one actress you see at the very beginning and the very end. That's the framing story, and that's Butterfly McQueen, that everyone has seen as the maid in Gone with the Wind.
Oh.
She is the very high-pitched voice one who gets all excited when Scarlett and she are trying to deliver the Melody's child, and she runs off and gets Rhett and all that. But she was a real scene stealer. She stole her scenes in Gone with the Wind, which wasn't easy with Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable, and she has scenes with both of them. And she's the one you wind up looking at and listening to, and she steals her scene in this. And she's you know who I'm talking about?
No.
She has the comically high-pitched, nervous voice.
I'll have to give it a watch.
Okay, well, when Atlanta's burning in Gone with the Wind, Melody is giving birth, and Scarlett, there's no doctors because they're all tending to the wounded, and Scarlett is trying to do something to help Melody, and she sends her maid off to find Clark Gable, and that is Butterfly McQueen, and she's only in the movie for a few scenes, but she steals them all, and she's one of the delights of the movie, and she's one of the delights of this movie. She has just talking, she makes you laugh. She has that not naturally comic air about her, and she was around for a long time. She did some television after this, and but she was so. For people who have seen Gone with the Wind, you'll see Butterfly McQueen. So people that who are older, basically our age, that remember the TV talk shows, you'll see Moms Mabley, and she's at least 20 years younger in this movie than I had ever seen her when she used to appear on the talk shows. She was kind of a favorite of the New York talk shows in the 60s because she was by then she came across as eccentric old lady telling, and she was a good stand-up comic. So she this kind of weird old lady telling jokes.
Well. Man, the thing is, Bobby Hebb could have been in the movie because he was tap dancing with Roy Acuff at that time when he was 10 years old. It's a shame he's not. It would have been great to have him in a movie with Nat King Cole.
Right. So we got to move on to the last one, huh?
That's right. So this is Visual Radio Film Library, and that was our film Killer Diller for May 11th. And now, May 18th. Hello, Frank. Our film is?
It is Lying Lips, 1939. This is an almost all-black production. There are a few white actors in it, but otherwise it is all black. It was filmed in New York City, and the name to remember is the man that wrote it and directed it, Oscar Micheaux. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. It's Micheaux. And he is one of these pioneers that you never hear about, but then when you hear his name, you look him up, and there's just pages of him on the internet of what he did. And he was basically the first black man to make a feature film in America. That was in 1913, and he was the first black man to. When I say make, I mean he rose. He was like Ed Wood. He wrote the script, did the directing, did everything he could, raised the money, and then he made his movie. And he was the first black man to do that on any film, on feature-length film in 1913. The first black man to do it with a sound film. By 1939, he was a bit past his peak, and I think your viewers will find this a bit primitive, but he, the man had no budget. He was basically raising money. He didn't work in the studio system. He was a loner. He was probably better known at this time, better remembered at this time, as a novelist. He wrote novels basically about the difficulties of being black in America at the time, and of course, being raised. He was born in the late 1800s, so being raised being born into the post-Civil War era and living through what he lived through, he had some stark stories to tell. I've never seen some of his first films, which apparently were pretty daring on what they got into on race relations.
Interesting.
And this is a murder mystery, but I think your viewers will say there's a lot of talking here. I wish there was more action. There's a lot of guys standing around talking. One of the guys standing around talking is the father of James Earl Jones.
Whoa.
And even if you didn't, and his name is Robert Earl Jones, and he lived a long time. He passed away not too long ago. I think it was the late 1990s. He was pretty old by then. Though I understand he ran marathons almost to the end, and he is billed in this movie as Earl Jones. But even if you don't notice that, it's a case where he may not look that much like his son or sound that much like his son, but you'll be watching, and all of a sudden his expression will change, and his son's face seems to jump out at you.
Interesting.
And then he hasn't got the deep voice that his son had, but he has this strong voice. When you think of James Earl Jones, he's this deep and powerful voice. And in this movie, when Earl, as billed in the movie Earl Jones, so he's Robert Earl Jones, when he's talking, he seems to drown out everybody else. He has a naturally resonant voice.
He did not say, "Luke, I am your father."
No, he could have been a Darth Vader. I don't think he would have been as good as his son.
I don't think James Earl Jones said that either. I think that's one of the big myths.
Okay.
He said something else. I'm just being funny. Luke.
Believe it or not, I've seen the Star Wars movies multiple times, but I've only seen that second one. What is that? The Empire Strikes Back. I've only seen that once, so I'd have to go. I really have to. That's getting on towards 30 plus years ago, so I'll have to go back and check that. Anyway, I don't think your viewers will be too impressed with the acting and a lot of dialogue, and the plot gets very complex. So you got to pay attention to it. Maybe that's why the dialogue kind of wears on you after a while, because you have to pay close attention, because there's all these family relationships and all that. But the important thing is the historical value of this. This is an independent black filmmaker who by this time had been making independent films. Not an easy thing for anybody, but for a black man who basically knows his product is just going to play in the black theaters, which means in a handful of cities, New York and Chicago and L.A., the big cities have black neighborhoods that have theaters that will show any film, but you had to fight to get into those, to get screen time on them. But he had been doing this for close to 30 years by then. His career as a filmmaker was almost over, but he was a real pioneer, and there's actually an Oscar Michaud's Award that I don't know if it's still given out, but in the early 2000s it was given out. And when the interest in early 20th century black culture rose, and I don't know exactly when it rose for everybody else, but it was really in the 90s that I remember it becoming. That's really when you started learning about all these guys that had a really rough time 70 years before. That's when his star really rose again, and he started getting recognition for some of the things he did. And if you said first black filmmaker to do fill in the blank, you'll see his name there as often as not.
I'll attempt it. Oscar Michaud.
Michaud.
I don't know.
Michaeux.
Michaud. It's like you say Devereaux,
Yeah.
So Oscar Michaud, I would imagine.
Yeah, people look him up, and give at least a nod to a guy that slugged it out for 30 years in the trenches when it couldn't have been fun.
Visual radio is Michaud. Frank Dello Stritto is Frank Dello Stritto Show. But get it, Michaud? I'm sorry.
We can almost make a poem out of that, but you're the songwriter, so I'm going to let you put it to lyrics.
And you're very humble about your career as a film critic, Frank. I think you're very astute. I think you're pretty much on the mark all the time, and you have a breadth of knowledge that maybe you don't even recognize.
Okay, well, there's a... I appreciate the soapbox you give me, because there's a lot of guys out there that know a lot about movies but never get to talk about them much. So.
But you see, what we're talking about with Ed Wood, and I'm not putting you in that category because I think you're very good at what you do. Your books prove it. The spirit. I have a spirit when I do this show. People can throw mud at me, they can do whatever they want, but they can't take away the fact that I'm passionate about my TV show. It's been going on for 33 years, give or take, right?
So when people ask you about it, you say, this is who I am, this is what I do?
Well, I think when you talk to people like Frank Dello Stritto and Jodie Foster and Michael Moore and Bill Press and Suzanne Vega and on, I think that kind of goes without saying that we do a pretty good job. And David Selby,
Well, I'm flattered to get top billing in that list. I'm flattered to be
there you
on
go.
that.
But
you must have been reading it from the bottom up.
That being said, there's a spirit when people are passionate about something, and you have that spirit. So it isn't just the information. In fact, if you read my record reviews, I just do it from the heart. I don't want to do Ben Fong Tories from Rolling Stone, right? This is Joe Vig, so I might call up someone who was in the studio with Johnny Mathis, Harriet Schock. She wrote a song on a Johnny Mathis album, so when you read that review online, I have one of the songwriters in the studio with Mathis infused into the review. Now, I think that helps the person when they evaluate if they want to get that record.
It reminds me of a story they told about Marlon Brando.
I'm sure. Now, thank you. I'm in the league with Marlon.
You are in the league with Marlon Brando. They said he would, when he in the first scenes of in a movie, when he made the first scenes, he would do one where he basically poured his genius into it, and then he would do another one where he went through the motions and all that, but he didn't feel the pain. He didn't go to he didn't bring the passion into it. And if the director couldn't tell the difference, then he would just go with it. He would just say, okay, this is a phoned-in performance.
Right.
Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but if you watch his old movies today, you could almost pick out the ones that he's passionately into, and the ones that where it's kind of a transparent performance where he's doing the actor's craft, but not really the artist's passion. And I don't think everybody will agree with me, but when I watch Sayonara, I think that comes across today as a performance that doesn't wear particularly well. I find he got an Academy Award nomination for that, and when I see the movie, I say, how did he rank? It must have been a bad year for male actors if that was one of the best. But then you'll see something like On the Waterfront, where he's just unparalleled, because then he was working with a man, Elia Kazan, who he had worked with a lot and who could tell the difference. But I've always remembered that. I mean, he wasn't going to put himself through the agony of getting into a character and all that unless it was going to have some results. The director could even tell the difference. Well,
I have something else in common with Marlon Brando. And so you can ask his granddaughter, because she may be co-hosting this show.
Oh, okay.
What people don't know is that the late Christian Brando had a child. And the child belongs to my co-host. I have many co-hosts for the show, you being one of them. So you have something in common with Marlon Brando, because you are a co-host on a show with Lisa Kavanaugh, who's the mother of Marlon Brando's grandchild.
All right. Okay.
Christian Brando dated the actress Lisa Kavanaugh, and Lisa is one of our many co-hosts.
All right, well.
You didn't know that because no one we kind of keep it secret. We haven't talked about it much because she's been very low-key, but she's a beautiful girl, just getting married. And she just gave birth to Marlon's great-grandchild. So we just announced that. No one's heard that yet.
Okay. Well, God, another first on your show.
Yeah, Marlon Brando has a great-grandchild, and born just a couple of months ago here in the Boston area. Okay. And the mom will be on our show at some point.
Okay.
How's that? We digressed all over the place.
Yes, but I should sign off because... we are taping this, and I'm actually playing hooky from work, so I got to get back to work.
All right, Frank Dello Stritto, thank you. That final movie from Oscar Me's show was Lying Lips.
Lying Lips, 1939.
1939. Thank you, Frank. Talk to you again in a couple of weeks.
My pleasure.
Have
Bye-bye.
fun in Hawaii.
Bye.
Bye. Frank Dello Stritto on Visual Radio Film Library. This was a lot of fun. And we veered off from the movies, talked about Bobby Hebb, Marlon Brando. And thank you all for watching. Lying Lips will be on the air May 18th. And if you're watching right now, that's tonight. Here's the movie, Lying Lips.